We have a couple guests here that know a little bit more about some of the tools that are in the water toolkit. And that is Greywater, for example. And I just want to ask really quickly to Laura Allen, who's here, and I did not prep her for this. If she could come up and join us, I feel like we are talking a lot about rainwater, but how we use rainwater and greywater on a site, for example, and climate appropriate plants is really important, and stormwater. Laura Allen wrote also a book that can guide you, talk about the Big Dipper constellation called I'm going to say it wrong.
The Waterwise Home.
The Waterwise
was the first
Home.
book,
Thank
and
you.
Then Greywater Green Landscape.
Great, great. So the Waterwise Home, it has all of these tools in there and helps walk you through. So I just want to make sure as we're getting questions asked or you're thinking of a question, Laura, do you have anything to add? Because there's a lot of questions about rainwater, but how can Greywater or other tools help our communities become more resilient?
Sure. So I'll just add the Greywater piece, which Greywater is water that you already used in your home, in your showers, sinks, and washing machines. And if with just a little bit of education, picking the right soaps that are going to be healthy for your plants, you can redirect that water outside for irrigation. So you have this irrigation source all year long. So during the driest, hottest part of the year when we don't have any precipitation, you can be sending out your laundry water to sustain your fruit trees and have local food. It doesn't use any potable water. So it's a great strategy. Homes are all built differently, yards are all built differently. So Greywater is like a concept, it is a tool, and then what specific way you're going to use it, what specific system, that will depend on your home and your landscape. Some of them are very simple, very affordable. Others can be more complex and costly.
I mean, these tools, some of you are probably watching going, okay, this isn't going to make a difference. This isn't going to add up. I mean, how much Greywater, for example, is there, and what is the resource? Do you have any numbers on that?
I do. This is a very rough number, but last time I looked, it was about 1 billion gallons a day generated in California.
1 billion gallons a day of Greywater in California. And just to remind everyone, Greywater, again, like Laura said, doesn't work everywhere, but it's a strategy that works when plants need it. It's hot outside, you can generate that Greywater. It can go and create fire resilience. It can create pollinator habitat. It can create food resilience if you do it correctly. It's easy to do. 1 billion gallons a day. I mean, Laura, what would you say the number one thing people need to check for to understand if Greywater is a good option for them in their community?
First, you need to be irrigating because it's an irrigation source. And then looking at your washing machine, that's, if you have one, that's usually the easiest source of Greywater. And then just thinking about, can you get that water directly from the appliance outside? So you need a pathway, like going through the floor, through your crawl space and out, or through a wall. So there does need to be a way to get out. And then a suitable landscape, like your trees, your bushes, your bigger plants. And that's going to mean a simple system can work for you. There are other systems, like I mentioned, but just to get started, it's usually best to start with what you can do simplest. They're most affordable. They are long lasting. They require very little maintenance. So they're very successful systems.
It's awesome. I want to mention that some of the funding through the Land Resilience Partnership and Department of Water Resources helped build Greywater systems where we are today. They actually helped start localizing California waters. And over at Evergreen Lodge, which is the sister lodge to this lodge we're at today, was our county's first ever Greywater system. And it was done as a simple system, just like you would do at home. And it is a branch drain system where all the showers from each cabin actually go to water the plants outside and create habitat. It helped solve some septic issues, and it helped with the water supply needs of some wells that were stressed. So it was really important. It also provided fire resilience relief after the rim fire at Evergreen Lodge. That was 1.8 million gallons a year of Greywater that's being recycled. Each one of those systems is almost like a house. It's almost like neighborhood scale. It added up. It provided lots of opportunities. And so thank you to Evergreen Lodge and Rush Creek. I didn't say that to them earlier as sponsors. Rush Creek also took that information when they built this lodge we're at here and has recycled close to 8 million gallons. So there's little actions do add up. I also want to note Blackwater reuse, which is in our toolkit, but it is not a low-hanging fruit, but it's a resource. It's resource water is what we'd like to call it, resource water. Here at Rush Creek is actually used as a fire hydration perimeter. This lodge is also an in-holding within the Forest Service. The rim fire came through right before they built and burned right through the property. And the Blackwater plus the Greywater has helped rebuild and regenerate a natural community here that we can see that you saw when Ryan ran out the door. So we've created a hydrated buffer strip with what we would call a nuisance water that nobody even thought about using. So again, this is the premise of the bird in the cage on the first slide when I got to talk with Martha. Many of those things that we don't even think of are, oh, look at how good our team is. They're right in back of us in this photo, in this example, but they're right around us. They're in our community, they're on our site, and we just need to actually collaborate and think a little bit wider and more open.
Regina and Laura, there's a question from the chat. Have public spaces using Greywater like Evergreen had issues with controlling the soaps that visitors bring in and use?
That's a great question. There have been an occasional problem, yes, especially when the system was first put in at Rush Creek. And so you have to look at your soils. Soils here were compacted from construction. And so that became a problem. Compacted soils, I think Meredith Hardy, when she was up here, talked about at the California Conservation Corps project, they couldn't, and I was there, you couldn't get a shovel in the ground. You also couldn't get a compaction rod in the ground. But you have to start off slow, especially with the nutrient pieces that come in through Greywater if your soils are not receptive. The good news is if you dose those soils slowly, they open up. And just like Meredith talked about, the clays can typically what they call deflocculate and open. And you can create not only a good receptive base for Greywater, but for plant roots, for deeper soils, and for when it rains, that water actually will then be harvested by the soil and not just run off and cause issues. So again, you do have to look at your soil base. Other than that, we haven't had any issues with any inputs, but I do want to call out that there are new devices. There's ozone that you can now put at your home scale laundry machine. You can plug right in and you don't have to use detergents. Hospitals have used those for a long time because of allergies to detergents. And so there's other innovations coming as we're thinking and learning together. There's new ways of thinking about how can we use Greywater or even resources waters in a way that doesn't add more stress on our environment, but adds opportunity and abundance.
And just to add a little bit, if somebody occasionally uses the quote unquote wrong soap, meaning it might have more salt or boron, it's not going to cause a problem. It's over time. So that's why with education, people can control their inputs. And at the lodges, they provide soap. So the majority of people are going to be using what's provided. And on occasion, if someone uses the wrong stuff, it's the mulch basins and the plants can definitely manage that occasional misuse.
I just want to say something about the mulch basin. We have mulch as a tool, and it's the one that almost everybody rolls their eyes at. Like Meredith Hardy was just up here saying one of the best tools that she used was putting a cardboard down. They call it sheet mulching, and putting mulch on top. Covering our soils is really key to cooling soils, making them open, allowing for that rain to percolate in. Talk about the easiest tool we got. Covering our soils rehydrates, builds healthy soils, sequesters carbon, creates the place and the space for nature-based solutions like trees and habitat. It makes the conditions to happen. So, you know, that's a pizza and beer thing right there. So again, having easy solutions that you could have your community over, and I call them pizza and beer because, you know, it's nothing like having your grandkids or your aunts and uncles or your community over, having some good old fashioned pizza and beer. But get these little solutions done. And the thing is for you to watch what happens in your community. A lot of what Bill showed from Ojai had to do with mulch. It had to do, where's the water going? How can we slow it down? How can we spread it? In a Greywater basin, the Greywater actually goes into a receiving basin. Laura taught me this a long time ago. I didn't know what Greywater was. I went and took Laura's class. And it actually acts as a filter. It creates a whole biological ecosystem that builds soil. And it's a really important device that rehydrates. So using that mulch in different ways is really important to build soil and buffer the impacts of different nutrients coming through Greywater. There's also some research being done at, I believe, UC Davis with mulch and Blackwater, for example. So there's a lot of different innovations out there, and most of them are really simple nature-based solutions.
Just one more question from the chat. Anne asked, what mulch can you use that's also fire resistant?
Ooh, that's a really great question. And I don't want to, does anybody have any answers to that?
I could just add that with Greywater basins, this is not covering your entire landscape in mulch. It's an isolated area. So it's really different than if you're concerned about like going, you know, all over with a flammable product. It's a contained, different basins are around. So I just want to clarify that it is different. And then do you want to explain more?
So typically different size mulch is the best because it provides the most biological activity. It's based on the premise of decay and composting. Also 4 to 6 inches of mulch, as much as that sounds incredibly difficult to get to, starts to create a composting humidified layer. And that creates more of a fire resilient mulch layer. If we have too small of a layer of mulch, it does dehydrate, the biological activity drops. And so we don't get that hydration piece embedded in the moisture in that mulch. So what I wouldn't say is one mulch more fire resilient than another. Not necessarily really you want to use what there is there locally, but make sure that you have it in a way that you are rehydrating it and have it deep enough that it does create that moisture. Pine needles typically are the one thing that you want to avoid as a mulch product. You actually want to use bark chips from other trees or products and natural products. I also want to say when you're done mulching to go through and sprinkle on top. If you have any kind of natural leaf litter, it inoculates that mulch layer with a whole bunch of hosts of wonderful bacteria and also really beneficial funguses that start that moisture holding process. So again, mulch that's local is usually good. Pine needles, try to stay away from, but then take leaf litter that's local and sprinkle it on top to inoculate it to start that moisture holding process. Again, this is a carbon farming piece. This is, most people are like, this is not water. Why are we talking about this? But it actually could help us save massive amounts of water, help rehydrate our landscapes, rehydrate our watersheds, grow food, help with water quality to our streams and wells. Really simple, low-hanging fruit. With that, Any closing words from Lindsay?
I think everyone should just take a look at watertoolkit.org. Not to sound like an infomercial.
Thanks, Lindsay. And any closing words from you, Laura? Thank you for being spontaneous.